Hi, I'm Wes Warren here with Dr. Peterson, Greg Stanley from Whitehall Management. We're here with Kim Keller. He is a dentist we've worked with. Kim, how many years have you been with Whitehall?
I think clear back in mid 90s is my first lecture. I went and watched Greg. He came up here to Boise and spoke about municipal bonds. It was wonderful.
Okay, so back in the bond days, back when that was
Yeah,
a good investment.
yeah.
So yeah, we kind of just want to hear your story. We know you're up to unique things, but why don't you just start with kind of the brief synopsis of the beginning, and then we'll kind of go into what's new. I know Dr. Peterson's worked with you over the years as well. So
Sure.
okay, so yeah.
Yeah, so I just basically a Whitehall a patron. I mean, I just followed the path that was laid out for me and didn't lose from that at all. We built a very hygiene-driven practice, and took advantage of the space. Always kept growing within the space that we had. By the time over the years, I grew. A few years ago, it's the point where we had 14 operatories. We had 6 of them dedicated to hygiene, 6 days a week. I had 3 associates, and just kept really full. And by the time I got to that point, pretty much I'd done that balancing shift where I had the associates producing enough to cover my production, and then I was earning the same as I had each of the previous, 5 years. And so I was able at that point to just stop doing dentistry and still maintain the income that I had before. But it was a 25-year process, right, to get there. And I think that, but what was nice is I'd worked really hard and done the multiple operatories and stayed busy. Same day work-ins, that was such a huge thing for growing our practice. We talked so many years ago with Greg talking about being hyper consumerism friendly. We said yes to everybody. We got them in, and it created a system that caused great growth. It created a system that it wasn't built on having to sell big cases. It was a system that was very hygiene driven. So I followed the pattern, and it did me very well. Also, at the end of 25 years, though, it was a time for me to say, okay, I don't need to run around this much. And so it allowed me to move on. So what I did in the meantime, just before COVID, I had started getting an MBA, went back to school at a local university in town, got an MBA, took a couple of years, but I wasn't in a hurry. And
What made you want to do that? Was there any kind of reason that you said, hey, I want to go back in school?
you
Yeah,
know
what drove that?
well, the dentists were also different and driven in different ways. I enjoyed the clinical part of dentistry, but I just found I always enjoyed the management part as well. And I think that, again, that's part of being, when we go to masterminds and we learn and watch everybody do what they're doing, that became more interesting to me than doing the dentistry as time went on, right? At first, when I came out, it was all about dentistry, and business was such a strange concept, but I had to learn it to survive. Then over time, I think it just started to change, and I found an interest there. And so I think it was just kind of a natural educational growth and process.
Any hard points, before you got, as you're growing, and you said it's kind of steady, but obviously you had big build outs, right? You had to make big decisions to
Yeah.
expand the practice. Is there any point where it was difficult? You didn't quite know if this was the right move to do this, or was it all pretty much, hey, it's the right move. We're busy, we're full. It's not a problem. Were you ever worried about attracting dentists there where you're
Sure.
at?
Sure. Always worried. I mean, the first time I brought an associate was only because I sat across the table from Greg on a cruise someplace in the Caribbean. He says, you're ready for an associate. And I didn't know, but I mean, I just knew I was busy. And I think I just needed somebody from the outside to look at me and say, now it's time to do it. And so having the coach made that possible. So that's when I did it. But then when I brought the next associates on in the future, I just had to, here's what I had to tell myself each time. I said, okay, if I hire this person and guarantee him this wage for the next year, can I live without that much salary? I mean, that's how I would convince myself I could do it. Okay, he's going to cost me, 120 or whatever. If the very worst case scenario happens, he produces a little or not very much, and I guarantee him this salary. Could I live with that much less salary? And at that point, I just told myself, okay, this is now. It never happened, right? I always stayed my salary, or over time got better. But that's how I mentally prepared myself to bring somebody in, to make it so I could accept the worst case scenario before I made the decision.
Okay. And so just kind of obviously slowly grew. You did your expansions. Was there a big expansion, or was it just of just adding on?
Slowly, it was adding on, because we bought a big space, and so over time, when somebody leave, we'd jump into that space and add some more chairs, or make 2 large rooms into 3 hygiene rooms. So over time, just slowly did that. But there became a day where it was full, and a buddy of mine, this is about 5 years ago, a buddy of mine came out of school just a few years after me. We grew up together in town. I had told him a long time earlier, I said, dude, you're only working 3 days a week in that practice. That's a beautiful building. You're going to work at the prison the other 2 days a week. If you want, I can help you, maybe we can partner up and we can open up more days in your building, because it's a nice place, nice location. And he was always, no, I don't know. So one day he called me, and I kid you not, that very morning, I had been in the shower thinking about, man, if I ever had Lauren's practice, that parking's too small. We got to figure out a solution for that. And that afternoon he called me. It was just so strange. And he said, hey, I want to sell you my practice. So just sell me the practice. So he was tired of running it. So I had 2 associates, and up to this point, I'd never been, partnership. I don't know, associates. But I was starting to feel this pressure of associates not wanting to stay if they didn't feel they had some equity, which is happening more and more and more. And so at that point, I offered 2 of my longer term associates, if you guys want to, let's go in thirds and we'll buy this practice together. And it was kind of tough because we had a hard time hiring a doctor. The first one we hired was a bust. So we each had to take a day out of the practice and go work 3 days. Each one of us took a day of the week to go keep that practice alive. And we waited for a really great doctor that we knew was working at a local FQHC. And so he joined us, and he was so awesome. The place just blew up. And same thing, I knew if I didn't make him a partner, I was at risk of losing a very great doctor. And so,
how close was this practice to yours? Is this something that was like
2.5 miles, maybe?
Yeah, so real close.
Yep, close.
Competing with each other. Did
Yes.
that bother you?
No, well, okay. There's a part of me that bothered a little bit. It's like, because I'd have patients who are like, hey, I see there's an Ampa Smiles right by my house. Can I just go there? I was like, what? You're hurting me, but it was convenient for them. And after a while began to say, oh, okay, this is actually having the large practice feeding into the smaller practice, help that smaller practice grow exponentially, right? And again, if I sit around and worry about I'm losing, then I don't grow. Whereas if I sit around and say, okay, I'm still going to gain from this growth over here, and now the 2 practices start, helping each other out, and that's where I began to see, oh, we can work together. And it's just as if I had built 5 more operatories down the street. That's really all that it was, right? We got to an expansion, couldn't go any further in our buildings. Let's just build 5 more, but just put them down the street.
And so a lot of this was driven about kind of the golden handcuffs. You've heard that saying, getting people to buy in and make a long-term commitment into your brand or your practice. So you bought another practice. How long did that? Well, first, tell me, was there anything when you bought that practice and got in there that you went, ooh, geez, this is different, or this is harder, or these employees aren't trained right? Aside from the doctor, getting the right doctor, what about the team and the systems inside that practice when you?
Yeah, it was an absolute mess. It was a mess. It was, I mean, we didn't really want the front office person. Turns out she was never collected money from anybody, which is part of the reason his whole thing didn't work before. I think he had just whittled it. He'd whittle it down to he didn't even have an assistant by the time we bought it. So it was like 1 hygienist, 1 front office person, barely working. So it was a really low price deal for that location, but a good building. And so
right, you bought the building essentially.
Yeah.
And no systems. If there's no employees, there must have been hardly any systems really in place. So you just migrated your systems over.
Yep. And those who didn't want it, it was fine. They moved on. I mean, you learn that whenever you bring another practice in, someone's going to not want to stay, and it's even worse today, right? you can't come in and give them what they are expecting, and you've got to run it the way that you know it's going to be efficient for you.
And okay, so you never gave up ownership in your main office. You gave it up in the satellite.
Yes, up until that point. Yep. So
Yep.
just gave
Okay.
it up to the satellite.
Okay. And then what happened? Yeah, tell us the next evolution.
Okay, and then here's where things go wacko. Here's where the world started changing for me. Um, I COVID happened. I started then I started thinking, I'm gonna make another little practice, and I'm starting to not do hardly much dentistry anymore. I'm just focusing on this practice building thing. In the meantime, for the previous 6 years, my brother Clint, who's also a Whitehall client,
Yep.
they basically modeled everything I had been doing through the years. We had 2 practices on the same block across the alley from each other.
Doing Whitehall, right? Yeah. I know it. We've been there. Yeah.
They grew there, so they had 15 operatories, and he had a dental partner, and then they had a couple of associates. So we're growing the same way. We have almost this identical size when it was all said and done. But they had started also buying some other practices. A friend of theirs who was a non-dentist was helping them manage those. And so we're looking at each other. We're both doing the same thing. We're both expanding into multiple practices in the towns around us. And we said, why are we doing this? This doesn't make any sense. So this was to your question earlier. This was right. the most jump off a cliff that we've done, and that was where we merged both of our practices together. Our groups together. And at that point it made sense that I become the CEO, because I'm not practicing and the rest of them are at some level,
right? And
so I can give this full time. But that was very much the hardest thing ever, because it's like giving up your baby and joining this new family, and that's what happened. And so it's more detailed than that, but that's the.
Of course, right. So you joined with your brother's practice essentially. You guys all you had 1 satellite. He had maybe 2 or 3. What do you have?
They had 4. I had one. I had started a second one that I let them be partners in, like a very small amount. I was like, okay, now we're really getting together here. We bought another building on the block and built a tiny little specialty type of practice, and then. Yeah, by this point we had about 8 practices between us, and then slowly just began the acquisition or merger process with others. And May 15th we closed and brought in 7 more practices, which puts us as 23 right now.
So when you bought 7, that was it was already a group you're buying, or did you buy 7 individual practices? It
was a group that was part of a larger group that kind of disintegrated, just really poor management. And so one of the partners in that group came along and became a partner with us and brought his equity from those 7 practices to join ours. So that put us well over the 20 where we'd been.
Okay, and so on your way to 20 some, you were picking up. Are you doing all mergers? Are we just acquiring practices, or were you doing scratch practices, or were you doing all the above?
So at this stage of what we're doing, we're kind of doing all of the above, but we're slowly starting to see where our niche is going to be over time. But you're right. All the above is what happened.
And which do you like so far? In terms of, you've tasted all of it. Is it pros and cons with both, and it's hard to tell which style is best?
So I think that the one that I think I've not enjoyed the most was buying a little practice from a very retired person who'd shrunk it down, and we didn't have, it wasn't enough days to keep a doctor busy. And it should have been one where we just rolled into another neighboring practice instead of trying to help that one grow, which I know it sounds opposite from how I grew the first one that I bought, right? Because that one went really well, that exploded. But that's been our hardest one. I think it's just location. But here's the model that we're going towards right now. It feels like in our area, there's doctors that are my age that are saying, you know what, I don't want to practice forever, but I've got 8 years left in me, and I want to get some equity out of what I have now. So I think one of the ideal ones that we've done recently is We partnered with a doctor who's my age. We said, okay, here's the value. We paid him 50, about 50% of his practice, but we're paying him over time. So that's nice for us. Don't have to get a bank loan. And he had a struggle with an associate, like 8 years ago, and he just never wanted to do it again because it's too hard. He has a ton of space, lots to grow into. He's got some management issues because his son is the office manager. And so there's things that we're just kind of having to slowly work through to make evident why. So he needs somebody to come in and say, here's the rules, here's what we do, and just kind of coach him and help him and take the stress off of him. So we're able to take the stress off of him, manage the financials, give him some pictures. And actually, some of our doctors, like my brother, loves doing endo, and this doctor doesn't like doing it. And so on Wednesdays, my brother goes in and does endo for him, which helps his practice be productive, but it helps the whole group be productive as well. So things like that happen.
As far as the ownership, I assume it's a collage. Each deal is different, how much ownership you end up with, and as far as a model there that you like, is there anything that you go, okay, this is the best? We give them a third, we retain 66. Is there anything that jumps out at you there?
I think until we become more specific, I'll tell you where we're evolving into. Every time I say to the doctor and say, okay, here's the thing, we're going to buy your practice, and our large group is going to, we get to have the profits, half the profits because of this, and we're just us and you're just you, and we'll work. And everybody says, well, how can I be part of you? How can I invest in the bigger group? Because so dealing with that question over and over again makes it look like we're either protective or hiding something. So I found it much easier to say, here's the thing. You can hold on to your half and you'll get half the profits. And you can work there and get paid 30% of your production plus half the profits. We take half the profits. It's a fair deal. I said, but if you want, I'll give you this choice. You can take your half and roll it up into the larger group and be a partner with us. But there's no guarantees that we'll pay you, 50% of the profits, because we're using the profits for growth.
Yeah, right.
So if you want the profits for you, wonderful. But if you want to have become part of the bigger group, that's great too. Just no guarantee of the profit returning to you.
You're rolling it all back through.
Yeah, you'll just get your 30% of production, and that's all great. And you can join us with the risks that we're taking. And so but everybody wants both.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. And I assume that you guys end up as the controlling partner in terms of the management.
Yeah, that's kind of how you have to decide it, is somebody is the one that makes the final decision. So they have to know that going into it. If we, decide there's going to be a larger merger, it's our decision to make, and you're coming along. So otherwise, it's just too complicated to have everybody having arguments and wondering who's in charge. So you just have to make sure that's known up front.
And but also you're making all the decisions financially, like the marketing budgets, the who works there, how much they get paid, all that kind of stuff.
Except for if I had 50-50 with somebody, I would respect that doctor. And I say to my friend, I said, we're both on the board. Right. Here's the decisions that we get to, that our group gets to make, but here's the decisions that you and I get to make. And it's a fascinating thing. You have to come up with this decision matrix and say, who gets to decide what, right? And so we all know what this is. And whether it's all the way down to the team lead assistant, to the associate doctor, to an owner doctor, to the board member, because we can't take the board every decision, which is what they want to do first. They want to know every assistant and every problem. It's just like, oh, I can't take everybody's opinions. We're so clunky, we can't get things done. So you had to decide who gets to make what decisions. And so if I come, so that was my little side note, but if I come together with somebody that I'm partner 50-50, there's a bunch of decisions that I say, doctor, because I know every doctor has these two concerns when I sit down with them. They want to know how much they're worth, and they want to know what control they're going to be maintaining. I want to know money and control. So if I can talk about that from the very beginning, and I can say, how much control do you want? And we'll write that into the agreement. Okay. So you and I are going to sit together. If I want to hire a new front office person, if you care about that, I'll make sure we have to agree on hiring or find that person together, if that's what's important to you. If that's not important to you, great. Then we'll take on that job, and that's our responsibility.
So each one is different.
in a way it's different. It's got its problems, and I don't know forever if it's going to be this way.
Right.
But see, we're trying to balance that whole concern of doctor autonomy, right? Doctors need to have autonomous ability to make clinical decisions, and we don't want to get in the way of that, right? We don't want to come and tell them you have to do this much of that, or we're your, or you can only use this lab every time. But at the same time, we have to be able to teach the doctors that there's choice. There's going to be whatever decision you make, there's going to be a consequence, right? And so we're trying to teach both of those at the same time. And I might get exhausted teaching that to everybody over and over, but I don't want us to be the group that's known as ones who comes in and tells a doctor how he can practice. And so we leave that out there for the doctor. And I think.
How many people are on the management team? One, people are asking, do employees work for individual practices? So obviously there's employees that work for individual practices, but you also have a management company, that manage it. How big is that at this point? How many people work inside of that?
That's a great question. So the management company itself, we've got one of my long-term employees. She is our, you may remember her, Rindy. Ron, Rindy manages the revenue cycle management. All these terms I never knew really existed, but now I know them more. So she does revenue cycle management. She's the one that all of our office people who are handling insurance, they can call her. She's the expert. She knows. And so any things that come up with insurance, she sends it out to them. So we got her. I've got Amanda Ma, one of my assistants. Now she goes to all the practices just to be on clinical. She'll go in and visit with the assistants and the doctors just to make sure that they're up to snuff, and she's a resource for them. We have a regional manager for the Idaho practices. Her job just to make sure that she's communicating with every clinic administrator. We put a clinic administrator in every office, and we teach them and we give them responsibilities. They have a manual for what they're supposed to do and what decisions they get to make. And so, but they have the regional manager who's close to us in the corporate office to be able to. She's like their friend, and she's the person they can talk to. And she's the one that can remind them why the manual is written this way for PTO or for other concerns that they've got. Mm-hmm. So, and then there's the COO. He's a non-dentist who's educated in healthcare, and so he and I do the lion's share of worrying and the work. I have now had to get an executive assistant just to keep up with all the emails and all the other things going on. So see, I'm an executive assistant, regional manager. Oh, and then we have like a cadre of accountants. So I think we've got 4 bookkeepers, some part-time, some full-time. And these new
right. Yeah, at least 10 people sounds.
Yeah, you got at least 10 people. Yeah, I'm sorry. You just wanted a number. I'm just.
No, that's all right. That's kind of what we want to know. And how is that working in your mind? You ran a large practice.
Yeah.
You ran a small practice when you started off. Now you're running a medium-sized group. Now you're getting to the point where it's a large group. Tell us. I don't want to say you're frustrated. Is it easier? Is it harder? Give us your feelings on all that.
Oh yeah, you can't be a full-time dentist. You can't do clinical dentistry and do the size of what we're doing right now. Right. I think there's a benefit that I'm the CEO and a dentist. I think that is very helpful. There's lots of people who get frustrated if there's not a dentist in that spot. But here's the thing. You know how there's, if you say to me, hey, Kim, I really think you should go out and you should say hi to every employee and slap them on the back and tell them how much you love them. And I'm going to say, that's the best idea ever. I'm going to do that. And then what happens is somebody else comes up with another great thing that that you can do. That I also want you to really dig into a better way to buy supplies. And let's save some money. I could do that. Of course I could do that. So every wonderful idea that somebody has, you can do it. You have every skill to do it. You've been through this before. But when you multiply all those things by 20, 22, and then you have so many places, what happens very quickly is you can't do all these simple tasks because there's just too many of them to do. And so now the things that you're used to controlling, you're having to have somebody else do, and they won't do it the same level that you would do it. But you have to learn to start giving up those those tasks to other people. And so I say that's probably the most crushing part, is just the huge volume of things that have to be done. It's hard enough to run one practice and do it for your own practice. You bring on two, you think you're pretty hot, but it starts to feel the weight. You get 3, 4, 5, you can't do it anymore. It's impossible to handle every employee's complaint. It's impossible to deal with every frustrated hygienist. It's impossible to deal with every insurance and every mad patient that comes through because the associate, offended them. You can't redo everybody's work anymore for the associates who, who messed up a denture. So that's kind of what I found. It just, the workload becomes too much, and you have to start learning how to hire people to take those things on.
Has that been was that difficult for you to let some doctors really, as you know, are, I'll say, micromanagers, and they kind of know that, by nature, that's how they are. Was that difficult for you to let go?
Yeah, absolutely. It is different. I mean, because conceptually, I know it. I know that, right?
Right.
But it's still, I will get sucked into every problem I hear in the office if I'm not careful. And so I'm learning, when they look at me, I say, okay, you're right. I'm going to step, because I'll hear somebody say something in the other room and say, we need to get a sensor. But what he really meant was he wanted the X-ray head itself. And I was like, he doesn't understand. So I'd run out and correct him, and then I'd go back to my office and try to keep up. It's just, I have to let people make some mistakes, learn some things, and know, and go. I had to pull into my space once in a while and remember, okay, I have a role that's these things, and everybody else has these roles. And so you trust your committees to do what they do. And I guess I should say that too. We try to, I mean, it's a real business now, right? It's not playing business anymore by yourself. It's a big different thing. And so we have teams. We have our operations team that meets every week. You have to have a good operating system. If you ever read Traction, that you've got to get that has EOS, which is an operating system. You've got to put something into place which isn't going to have you sit around and argue forever for hours at a time. You've got to have a concise way to prioritize what's happening and take care of those issues. So we've got once a week we have a 90-minute meeting with an operations team. Then we have an executive team, which includes other owner doctors who maybe we've got them over marketing temporarily until we can have enough money to get a real marketer, right? Somebody else, a doctor, is over the clinical concerns, and another doctor is over recruitment of doctors. So we're all taking roles until it gets too big, and then we have to hire somebody else to do it, and we make a team to work on each of these processes.
What about the practices themselves? And are you buying practices that are already fully developed, or you haven't developed? I mean, like financially, are they up to speed? Are they up in good numbers? They just want the weight of management off of their shoulders, or are you having to go in and really turn some practices around?
It's both. I mean, but I will tell you, we're at a point right now. There's this strange desire to grow. When you get get it in mind, like, I got to grow this thing, I got to establish myself, and so you're buying almost everything, and some of them are duds, and you're like, why did we ever buy that one, right? But we're at a point right now where now people come to us, and we can start to evaluate: is this going to have a doctor that's going to stay on and going to be a quality doctor afterwards? Does this doctor, what are they looking for, and can we provide that for them? What's the burden that's going to put on our team to bring this practice on? And because this last thing has put a lot of burden on us, and we're rapidly hiring. We have to settle and reestablish what we can manage before we bring others on. And so, yeah.
And as far as what, obviously you picked up a pretty big group just recently. You see any future obstacles in growth, and maybe doubling again, or is it pretty much you feel like it's you got a clear path of what you can accomplish here? Or do you feel like, oh, we got to solve this, or we got to solve that, or we need to bring on more operations people? Or what would you say?
All of that. Yeah, all of that. And to be honest with you, what you get to a point where you start to realize that you want to become who you are and sometimes we're still defining that. For example, this thing out there, this discussion of like, oh, we're going to grow real big and have PE bias, and we're going to get these multiples. That multiple word always confused me. Greg, you don't remember this, but there was a meeting that we had many years ago where Wayne Mortensen was there, and I happened to be sitting at, and Wayne Mortensen has, I think it's Kentucky. At the time, he had like 4 or 5 practices, and they had a call center. We're all like, wow, what's a call center? Oh, it seems so beyond the rest of us. We couldn't understand this. But I was sitting at a table, and Wayne Mortensen was there with some other doctors. He goes, oh yeah, they're asking multiples of blah, blah, blah. I was like, what is he talking about? What does this mean? You know, they're like 8 times. I was like, what does he mean by this? And it took me years to ever be in a situation like where I am now. I was like, oh, that's kind of thing. It's common now in dentistry is there are people who are trying to just peg practices together so they can get this big payday and sell to private equity. And there's a lot of danger in that. Because you can cut corners and not make a good system. And our goal is to build a good business. My goal is to make it such a good business that we wouldn't want to sell to somebody because the profits are too good, right? So we're working towards that. But having said that, if you come across another group who's similar to you, there can be power in joining together. We're already starting to see some insurance companies giving us higher rates just because we're a larger group, right? Now, I'm not going to promise or say that happens to everyone, but we're starting to see more of that. And it puts us in a better position for purchasing supplies and things like that. But
let's go back to the DSO thing where you said that you saw some danger in, we call it like sticking practices together and kind of cobbling it and pretending like it's some great well-oiled machine and then selling it off to private equity. What are the things that you see as potential problems with that? We certainly see stuff ourselves, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, if it's not an organized machine, the first they're gonna come in and say you don't have near as much value as you think you do because you don't have a software system that we can't connect with everybody. You haven't done. There's no management team. These offices just kind of run around doing their own thing, and so the value is going to be less if you don't make it, be running well, because they're gonna invest $1 million just to bring a team in to make it a better run place, right?
Right.
And also, if they come and drastically change it, then they may have doctors and staff leaving, which again drives the price down even more. So everybody thinks that they cobble them together, it's going to have a higher value, but you're more valuable if you have a business that's valuable, right? If you already are running things properly, you can show that that you have your financial statements look healthy and good, or they're growing in the right direction. That's what makes a business valuable. It's just not the fact that there's a bunch of them together. And so I think those are some of the, I hope that's not happening as much now, but I know it was a big thing.
It was a big thing, yeah. And a lot of things that we saw also was less than committed owner doctor, the owner doctors that were left there.
Yeah.
No, they locked them down for 5 years, and man, they were watching the clock. And when that clock hit, they're out of there. And was there really a system in place to develop other doctors to maintain that production?
Yeah.
A lot of times there isn't, but
Wes, Dr. Peterson, can you weigh in? This is a practice that you are very involved in.
Yes, it's really been fun to watch what Dr. Keller's done with this. I remember about 10 years ago on Wednesday mornings when you had your meeting with your executive team and you wouldn't leave because you had to control everything. And we spent a lot of time talking about creating a management system, and it was very basic, but it didn't take 6 months, and you came in and gave your part or discussion and did the other things you were doing. So you're right about creating the reproducible management system. If you don't have that, you've always got some level of chaos going on. And
one other thing I want to throw in, Dr. Keller, before he went in this direction, he had enough interest in management, and he really was involved in his community and committees. And in other words, I think it sounds like he just kind of brought that all back home to practice. Is that right, Dr. Keller?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's just kind of an interest that I had. And I appreciate you saying that, Greg, because I think that if you do any of this stuff just to try to make a big win someday, a big financial win, I think that you're putting yourself in a dangerous spot. If you're doing it because you feel that you can make things better and it's something that you enjoy and you can protect your income along the way, I think that it's a better way to do it than just thinking to go chase to get something really fast. That whole get rich thing, it's fast. It's always dangerous. I just don't see it working out for most people. And so the slow process of acquisition, of learning, it's just like the kids who want to buy all the furniture with a credit card on their new house, like everything fancy and nice, and then find themselves not being able to enjoy it because there's so much pressure to pay for it, versus enjoying the process in your new house and buying the next new couch because it just is so, you saved up for it and you love having it and it was so worth it. And being able to look back and see, and it's the same thing with business. If we're too greedy up front and we don't let things grow and progress, then we're setting ourselves up for some hard next several years that are miserable to pay things off. And you're just so worried that something bad's going to happen.
Well said.
Yeah, what are the next steps for you guys? Where you guys see yourself in kind of the next 3 years? Where are you headed, would you say?
Well, I see us taking a little bit of a pause right now and just retooling the team, because this brought a lot of work on us these last 7 practices. So we got to build our team up a little bit more, get our financials really well in order, bringing everybody on fast. It's keeping track of the financials with the accounting is tough. I mean, it's not like everybody has a different level of doing their own finances. And so you got to bring all that together, get a good solid group of financial statements so that we can be sure, we can present to banks, the powerful position that we are in. And then I think once that gets settled, we will slowly just add practices as they come, good, probably higher quality practices, I think, as long as we can provide the service that person wants to be with us. We'll continue the process of letting people choose to either be a partner on just the practice level, or if they want to be a partner at what's called the top co level, or the larger group. And I'm definitely looking at doing a model of both. In other words, if you want to do a mix, I'm fine with that too. And so we're looking at those things.
Have you done that yet? Has that aside from your original partners, I get that, the first people in, but the last 5 or 10 offices, has anybody done a mixture, bought into the big company and forego the ownership in the small or the satellite, I guess?
Weirdly, the last few we've done, people have rolled their whole equity up to the large company.
They did, huh?
Yeah, the last few we've done. But I know that a couple that we're talking to now, they're going to want those profits. So for me, I love the fact that I can offer them the option, because it just makes it so much less like they think I'm hiding stuff. I'm not hiding anything. We want a successful business for you, because when you're successful, we're successful. That's all that we want. It's always been that way, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't want you to think we're hiding stuff. We're trying to run away with all of your value, but we're going to make a good business decision, and you can join it with us or not join it with us. We'll if you just do your practice, we'll work together to make sure your profits are higher, so that when you want to sell your other half someday to another doctor, our hope is it's more valuable than it is today. If we work together.
And what would you say, you step into these practices and what systems or what strategies do you implement that seem to give you the biggest bang for their buck, as far as getting them growing again?
Where's the emphasis?
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you where the weirdest emphasis is. It's just them knowing that they've got somebody that they can talk to for some help. I mean, it's what Whitehall was to us, right? It's just having the confidence that you're not out there by yourself. Honestly, that's mostly what it is. And we have I do a leadership training every 2 weeks with all the clinic administrators, bring them all into our office, and we talk about things like coaching. I mean, that's the biggest thing. If we can get that, and you guys know this, because that's what Ron had me sit around the table with my people for, is right. Let's have the clinic administrator take on roles and decisions and let her or him be empowered to make those decisions. So we follow the same model. We're trying to get those clinic administrators to be able to have the power to make decisions, but we're there to stand next to them and say, this is what we've seen elsewhere. This is a problem if you do this. I agree with you on that. And so I really think it's mostly just knowing they've got someone they can work with.
Basically coaching them also. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, with expertise. How long does that meeting last?
That's an hour and a half to 2 hour meeting every 2 weeks.
Okay. And you bring everybody in. So when you add these practices in, there'll be 20 CAs in there.
Yeah, exactly. It was men's week. Now the ones in Oregon, there's 4 of we just got her in Oregon, right? So they've got to Zoom in with us. But like I have a sister who's a really qualified coach, got a master's degree in coaching, so she came and spoke to them the last 2 times, and it's just powerful stuff that they get to learn about, because I think this is the biggest problem we're dealing with right now is leadership. We're also used to the command and control model, which is I'm your boss, I'm paying for your check, you'll do what I say. But that is gone. It's gone. And now it's like, it's coaching. It's the whole things that we just hate. We have to listen, and we have to care, and we have to know what their hopes and dreams are. And we have to, it's harder because they will just walk away, right? They'll just like, I'm going to go someplace else. So the power model we were using 15 years ago, it's just evaporated, and it's I don't know. It's a harder way to go. So I spend most of my time. We use a concept called outward mindset. If you've ever heard of the Arbinger group, so we talk a lot about how you see other people as human beings, not as objects that you use to get what you want, or there are obstacles in your way, or just they're oblivious to your life. If we see people as people, we have a better chance of working together as a team. So we spend a lot of time talking about this new way of leading.
Would it be fair to say that really what holds you back is this management team and everybody, and having enough to be able to take on the weight of more practice? It's really just more skilled players. Yeah. Okay.
And it's a balance because they're expensive, right? So how much do you take from profits to buy more management? And do you think that that's going to be able to increase profits in the future? Because, but that's the big challenge. But it's the real challenge before us. So I think we have to take it on.
And then as far as the marketing of these practices, is it all centralized, or do they still run with their old marketing systems, marketing companies they use, or do you kind of have them switch? How's that all work?
Well, I'll tell you, this is kind of a newer thing, so take it for what it's worth. But we have a hygienist. He's just a go-getter. One of those guys that there's a few people in the world that just never stop working, and you could ask them to stop working, but they'll just keep working. So if you can ever get them to be part of your life and remind them it's okay to have a real life, but still utilize their desire to keep working. This guy loves. He built his own little marketing company, digital marketing company, and he's doing hygiene, full time. So he's doing this at nighttime, and he's marketing for chiropractors and things like that. And so we said, hey, Fernando, like what you're doing, but we want you to do it with us. And so we basically we're coming in, we're gonna partner with him. We're gonna buy half of his marketing company. And so he's gonna feel that the work he's doing for us, our group will pay him, but then we also still get half the profits. And he's very invested in helping us get our marketing strategy out there. Because you know how it is, you hire an SEO group and they're with you for the first 6 months, and then you never hear from them again, but you're still making a monthly payment. And it's super frustrating. So we figure we'll just own our group, and Is he perfect at it? No. Is he learning? Yeah, but he's got so much energy. He's learning it, and we will just have him do our marketing. So each practice, we evaluate the patient need for the practice. Our big practices need very little marketing. They just, it's kind of unfair because they have so many people out there who can refer. But the smaller ones or the newer ones, we turn up the dial more for them for marketing. And
is there a budget that you have in mind? Is that, you've heard budgets thrown around in dentistry,
Yeah.
between 2 and 5%. Is it all, are you
it's
going to
about,
fall in there somewhere?
yeah,
with your
it'll
practice?
fall in there. Some practice. I think when we look at the overall group, we'll fall in there that way. There may be some practices we do a little bit more in, and others that we do less in. A new idea that I hope is going to work. It may fail, but I'm excited about trying this. Is I bought a website a long time ago called Matchmouth, matchmouth.com. I just bought it. I mean, I thought it was kind of funny. And actually, I told Ron about this. I was going to try to make it like the Uber for dental assistants, right? But we've switched it around now. We're going to advertise in our whole valley here, and then if somebody calls in, we'll put them in the practice that best fits what they're looking for. So it's kind of a 1-800 dentist, but just for our area. And but that's still in its nascent stages. We're still working that up, but I'm excited about that. That should be fun.
And that, as far as recruiting goes, do all the practices do their own recruiting? Or is that kind of what you're trying
For doctors or for staff?
For staff.
So yeah, they mostly recruit. I think we're gonna have to move that to be a more centralized thing, but for the most part, they're still recruiting and we're just supporting them in that. But I have a feeling we have to centralize it more.
Yeah, so you guys grew quite a bit over the last 3 or 4 years. How many practices did you guys add you grew by 10, 12, right?
Yeah. So we officially became a group December 1st of 2021. So we're not even 2 years yet. And we had 9 practices then. So it's been really growing.
Quite a bit. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Kim, who does your appraisals of the practices that you acquire? Do you do that internally? Do you have a group you work with, or what do you use for a solid appraisal?
We're still shooting from the hip on that, Ron. We pretty much walk in and say, this practice has this, that, and the other, and we'll usually fall into the 85-90% of collections. I mean, it's just, that's the language that dentists want to speak. And so we speak that language to them. For our appraisal, we appraise our company differently. We just kind of take a look at, our growth strategies. We take a look at what the market's doing for these larger group practices, and we come up with a number that's something that works for all of us as partners when we bring a new partner in. And I just kind of do that internally. I'll ask opinions from my accounting firm to say if they think that I'm close, and yeah.
You're in the range then between 70 and 90, because that seems to be almost a rule of thumb for the vast majority of practices that are sold.
Yeah, we just kind of hit that 85 and start there pretty much every time.
Okay.
All right, let's open it up for questions. If people have questions, Lori, if you wouldn't mind unmiking people. So Dr. Mahdi, I can see raising his hand. So if we could unmic.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for sharing everything with us. So I'm still a single office. I'd like to grow in the future, and I was just wondering if there's anything you would do differently if you could go back and change time when you were a single office, so that you would be better poised for the growth. Like maybe it's something technologically, anything, mindset, systems wise. Like what do you wish that you had started earlier, so that you didn't have to go back and kind of change it? Because when you're bigger, obviously it's harder to pivot. You mentioned about having access to all the computer systems, things of that nature. Anything.
Well, so looking at today's, and thank you for the question. Looking at today's market of dental practices, I do think that there's a benefit to getting a web-based practice management software. Because if you were to partner with somebody else, it's a real pain when you bring in some, some chintzy one-off place or thing, because you're. But I would be if you're thinking of growing beyond that ever, I would get a practice management software which is more web-based. That said, but for you for growing, the thing that I appreciated the very most that was built the bones of my practice was the Whitehall method of we just made sure the phones were always on, from 7 to 6, somebody was answering the phone, and we just said yes to everybody. It was an old Roy Smith thing, right? Everybody who called, we just got them in, and you take away as many of the filters as possible. You take away the filter of oh, we only come in if you pay $250 the first visit. Or you take that filter away. You take away the filters of, oh, we don't take your insurance company. Whatever your front office is doing to filter patients, you try to remove as many of them as you can, and then answer the phones when other people won't. Because at 5:01, people are calling your office because they just got out of work, but your staff closed down. So, don't just be ready to take the phone calls. That's literally how we grew the fastest. We had a yellow page ad that said, if you have a toothache, we'll get you in by 10 today. That was just how we did it. And that's how we grew. It's got its set of stresses, but if you want to grow, that's what I would say. And the other thing I would add, if I were to give advice, is be really clear with yourself on what enough is. In other words, set yourself a goal and be proud of it when you hit it, and don't look ahead and say, I'm not there yet. I suffered my whole career with this. I'm satisfied, but not content. and I think that there's a point where you just need to be able to say, I'm gonna be really happy when I've reached this reasonable spot and enjoy that spot, but then know where enough is. Because if you think that enough is never going to come, then that's an emotional thing you've got to deal with. So I would say, look back on what you've come to and say, man, look at this. We've accomplished these things and this is awesome. And then set some reasonable goals for your next level. When you get there, look back and say, wow, look what we accomplished. This is amazing. But if you're ever setting this unknown goal that I'm gonna, then it's just more stressful. I don't know. I hope that helped a little.
Question about, so it sounds like you've got the CAs and you're kind of doing the Whitehall's, your staff-driven practice thing.
Yes.
Which usually accompanies a bonus, and I know you've done them in the past. Are you still continuing doing bonus systems inside your practices? Is that still part of
some of them have more than others.
Right.
It's you know how it is. You make up a bonus and it's awesome, and then it's not awesome, and then somebody's upset, and so the compartmentalized bonuses still, I think, are what we do more of than anything. We'll do same day bonuses as well, but not every practice does that. We'll give CAs bonuses, but some get paid so well, it's like, I don't know if I want to give them a bonus, and it's just we deal with the same questions over and over again.
Somebody asked here about management leaders. You mentioned that they were expensive. So what kind of background are you looking for? Yeah, with your management team, is there some kind, or is it homegrown? Or are they internal?
Most of my management team is homegrown, but it's to the point where if you start picking too many of your good people out of the CA positions, then those practices struggle. So we did make a good choice. I think recently we brought in a gal who had been managing 10 optical companies, and they started making her travel, and she's like, I don't want to do this. And so she's been marvelous. She's had to learn dentistry, but again, what I love the most about her is she's just building good relationships with the CAs. These practices that we brought on recently, they'd call the home office and not get answers for days, and they had to drive, they had to meet somebody like 2 hours away just to get the paychecks because the bills weren't being paid. I mean, there is just odd things like that in a fast growing, non-well-managed group. So what these folks just are happy to have anybody to talk to and answer their questions. Because when
Wow,
yeah.
It was bad. These groups were bad that you were
It was bad. Yeah. And so what happens though is again, usually these people are coming to the doctor, right? If it's a single practice, like the doctor who just talked to me, they're going to come to you with your questions because you're the ultimate say. You're the one who's made the investment in this practice. But when you have the multiple practices, it's another group, they need to be able to talk to somebody because nobody wants to get in trouble, right? And so I think to us, I think I went off though. So we hire people a lot internally, but now we're looking more externally. We're looking at maybe doing a director of hygiene now. I'm looking really close at correcting or creating a space for that because we've got 55 hygienists, right? And
well, how are you finding 55 hygienists?
Well, they're coming and going, right? I mean, I mean, there's a bunch of practices in the valley. It's not, but and some of them bounce between practices, and so we're like, I'm out of here. It's like, well, I got another practice in another town. I mean, it's got its issues, but we don't want to lose them because they're so valuable. But I think if a director of hygiene, again, I'm still feeling it out, but that's a whole culture that needs a leader, right? And how does that interact with CAs? I don't know yet. How does that interact with are we going to, I don't want to further silo this whole problem of hygiene in the dental offices, but I also know we have a group of professionals that want to be treated like professionals, who want to be respected by a peer. And I'm not as good at respecting the hygiene, it's not natural because it's been so, there's just this natural tension between hygienists and doctors that shouldn't be, but it is. And so, but I don't want people to feel that. And so that's something I think we're going to look at as a possible hygiene director.
Dr. Ron.
We have a hygienist who's a CA in our group, Jessica. She works for an office that I also coach in Oklahoma, Newcastle. It's the main office. Now they have a second office, but I'd like your comments, if you don't mind, Jessica, about the hygiene department in a group that large and having a leader, because you're pretty much doing that now as the CA of these two offices and the manager of the hygiene group. So with your permission, Kim, could she make a comment?
Oh, I hope she does. Yeah, that she's the exact example of the type of person we're looking for.
Yeah, so I was a hygienist in the practice since 2008, and I've been managing it probably since 2015 now. We picked up our second practice, and so our flagship practice, we have about 9 hygienists that work there total, 5 a day. But it's the hardest position to fill has been the hygiene team lead because they're so unique, and it's really hard. I mean, they already took me out of practice to manage, and so to do 2 hygiene salaries only in management positions was hard to wrap a brain around a few years ago. Not so much now that we've grown, but my front office team lead ended up being really good with them. So she kind of took the hygiene department along with the front office. And they come to me for clinical questions, treatment questions, things like that. And they go to her for more of the HR stuff. But I think it would be a great position. I think you could do a whole lot of training on, soft tissue management and philosophies that make sense, because as a hygienist, like the schooling, it's different in different places of the country, but the schooling sets them up for failure to a degree in the way that it is presented. And I almost, hygienists, because I am one, they're a hard group to deal with because they are black and white and it is going to be this way. And it's really hard for them to wrap their brains around a different spot. And the way you have to approach them is to engage them in discussion and ask them questions. And eventually you have to get them to come to find the truth themselves. And they definitely respect a hygienist doing that more than other positions sometimes.
Very well said. Very well said. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have to check that license. It didn't sound like a hygienist to me, Ron. So
Oh, she's an awesome business leader too. She's
great.
a fair find, I'll tell you.
You know, and she represented just now what we see over and over again when it's kind of this whole outward mindset. If you really can see things through the other person's eyes, you're blessed to see life in a better way and less judgmental for how you think things should be. And it happens in business, it happens in politics, it happens in family relations. I mean, she just said she sees the business from another point of view, that these new hygienists coming out of school are so focused on what they were indoctrinated on. And it takes them a while to know they're dealing with people. They're not necessarily dealing with a decision tree, which is built by somebody that you must follow or else teeth fall out. You know, I mean, it's just, they're dealing with people and they got to understand how people think and how they feel.
Great. Any other questions? Anybody else got any comments or any questions?
Dr. Mahdi.
I think you mentioned something about acquiring a specialty practice. What specialty was that, or is it all GP? And you have a preference, or moving forward, do you think your niche or your eye for what you want to acquire would change, or would it always be GP?
You know, thank you for the question. Since we're still kind of new hacks at this, it's hard for me to be able. I know that you're supposed to have a really specific mission in your business, and we do, but we still haven't kind of come up with exactly what our model is. But to your point, we are pursuing a local orthodontist in town, right? Like to purchase his practice and slowly bring another orthodontist in as he retires, so that we have a place to send all of our ortho to. So the idea is to keep as much as you can in house. Once you start getting bigger and you see how much is leaving, but at the same time is that balance with the dentist autonomy, right? The dentist, you know, we say, doctor, we need you to help do the best you can for all the patients. We want to keep things in house. It's like, well, I don't know how to do that. That's okay. I got another doctor who can do that. So will you please allow that doctor to do that within the practice? One of our doctors is really good at taking out wisdom teeth. I mean, he's good. He went to the service and he did it and he loves it. We've got him going to 3 different offices now. They'll set up a full day and he just comes in and takes out wisdom teeth, which is great because, you know, that practice, especially if it's a practice where a doctor's a part owner, well, that increased production for that doctor, right? And so he gets to share in some of the profits, and it increases the ability for that practice to hit their goals, because you brought in somebody who's very productive with things that they're shipping out to a specialist. So we're still working through it. It wouldn't surprise me if over time we bring more in. But we're not trying to create a model where we have them. It's just like, well, this seems to be the next best sense
So
thing.
right now it is all general practitioners.
All general practitioners right now. Yep.
And I had one other question about the how are you managing the debt? Or you mentioned, I think you hinted that you kind of try to save as much as you can. Is there a certain percentage that you that you try to stay within? Do you kind of do it Dave Ramsey style? You save up everything and then buy cash, or like heavily leveraged?
So let me tell you how I did it when I was at your stage. So I think that's more meaningful of an answer. So and when I was where you are right now, I knew how much I wanted to take home, and I made sure that was whatever I did, whatever my expenses were, I could make sure I took that at least home. And then I'd set a goal for what I could do. Greg gave us a little red book, and I put on my old 91 Cadillac. I mean, it was an old, and I put a number behind the steering wheel, and I knew what my goal was for the next year. And I just, every year I put a new number, and we just kind of got there, because your mind just says, let's get there. But you had to picture what that was going to be. Do you still do that book, Greg?
Yes, I still have it.
Yeah.
I thought it was around here somewhere.
Yeah.
I
So,
quote it.
yeah. So what I guess I'm saying from that is, if you know where you want to be, what you want to be taking home, then these other decisions you make, like what debt you're going to take, that can kind of define how much you want to take on, but still protect what you're trying to get. And there's always a risk with it. But what I finally came up with for my own self is I knew I was going to budget like $2,000 or $2,500 a month towards equipment debt. And whatever that number is, that's where mine was. And so If I got a CBCT, then that's how much it's going to be. And then over time, once I'd paid off most of that CBCT, maybe if I wanted to bring in something else, then I could, if the bank would let me, I just roll everything into a new one. But I always kept my payments consistent at $2,500 a month for debt repayment for equipment. And I just bring more in. And if I had to get another loan, fine, as long as my line item was $2,500 a month. And so that meant I didn't go buy the most expensive and go for, oh, I hope that this $10,000 a month is going to save me. I just took my time and always kept that number where I knew it was safe, could protect my income as we grew. For me, that's how I worked debt. Does that help at all?
Can I just comment on this? Dr. Keller never joined the ranks of people you might refer to as high rollers. He wasn't a big spender, and yet here he is in charge of dozens of practices. So it kind of a lifeline for those who think, oh, I got to go crazy to live out my dreams.
Yeah.
So that model you just laid out would work with practices. In other words, you say, okay, if I buy a practice, is it going to impact what I want to take home?
Yeah.
If the practice makes nothing, can I afford to just make the payment? And you kind of make that decision. And
yeah.
Ron, what have we missed here?
Well, nothing, but I think the evolution of this talk is fit what I've observed from DEO meetings, where a few years back, the people at meetings talked about how many offices they had. That's not the topic anymore. It's about quality. So it's gone from quantity to quality, which is only logical. And I think Dr. Keller's put together a very thoughtful quality business. And one of the key things is he didn't put it together to sell to Heartland or to do the Brady Frank thing. He's put it together as a long-term successful business that has value and can generate income for his family and many families for generations.
Yeah.
I have a question here, Dr. Keller. As Dr. Ron points out, that a lot of the DSO models are somebody comes up to you and says, I want to buy your practice now. Just keep doing what you're doing. You don't have to grow. You just got to keep doing what you're doing for so many years. What do you tell people when, because that's kind of that's not very challenging. What do you tell people when they're doing this?
Well, okay. I hope I'm answering this correctly. Our whole vision is the name of our company is called Ume, which is a funny Japanese plum tree. Ume Dental Growth, and in our vision we're about growth, and that means from the individual to the practice to the large business. As we grow that, and I just tell it to everybody, I can't tell you where we're going. We're just going to build a quality business, but all quality businesses are built to try to be so quality that somebody would want to buy you someday, right? I mean, otherwise, why are any of us building these businesses? Because we know that someday it's going to happen. But I just tell them we're moving towards a path to be quality, and there's going to be a day where the banks say, hey, we're probably not going to lend to you anymore, because banks like to have a lot of collateral. And if your collateral is only income coming in, it gets to be too much for the bank world to handle. And at that point, if we need another partner, then that's where you get private funding, right? But people always think that private equity is going to come and you sold to private equity. But there's another reality to this, is you get to pick who your partner is going to be, right? You can say, this is the deal and here's how we want it to go. We're bringing you in as a partner, and this is how we'd like it to be from our point of view. Now, once you give over power to somebody, you've given it over, right? So I haven't reached that threshold yet, and to me, honestly, Greg, it doesn't matter to me. I'm 57. We'll all keep doing this for 5 or 6 or 8 years, and if I walk away not making it big, but just get enough back that I put into it, my life is great, right? I don't need to hit a home run. That's been my whole mantra in life, is I don't need to hit a home run. We make enough money coming in. Just keep what you've earned and don't try to, lose it all in a big investment. And so I'm not waiting for a home run. I'm just going to try to keep building a quality business. And there may be a day where we merge with somebody, or somebody with more money comes and partners with us, but we'll do it as a group who who's prepared for that day. And I don't know if that really answered your question.
Yeah,
very
no,
well.
that's the answer. So it's more of a, hey, let's all grow and improve, as opposed to just stand there while I get some more people to just stand there and we'll sell it for $1 bazillion, a multiple. Okay, Wes, back to you. Anything else?
Yeah, anybody else have any questions? We just want to make sure that everybody, okay, great. Dr. Keller, Ron, any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Any last parting comments? Dr. Keller, anybody going down this road or thinking about it? Any parting words of wisdom?
You know, if you're going to have to partner with somebody, you're not going to do it all yourself. I've watched friends try to do this by themselves, and you burn out at a certain point. And so you have to know, it's so awesome to be a dentist, because you can just have your practice and have all the controls you want, and you'll hit a point where you can't make any more, which is awesome. If that's enough, wonderful. You know, there's only so far you can go without the next investment, but there's a point where it's hard to do something that's this big by yourself, and you'll need a partner, and you have to be willing to share that with somebody. And that's super risky, because you just don't know who your partners are going to be, or how if they're going to think the way that you do. So I think it's a lot of my work right now is partner management, right? I mean, it's managing expectations. It's understanding everybody. It's having meetings where we're not fighting and arguing, you know, which it's great to disagree, which we have to, but it's also, it's building trust amongst all the partners. That's what I think is my biggest role right now in this, is just making sure that we all work together as partners. And so I guess I would just say that when you look at growing, you're partnering with somebody. And so even your associate, if you hire an associate, that's a partnership. And that's not a financial partnership, but it's a professional partnership, and you're trusting and they're trusting. And I've learned with people, when I talk to them, I say, hey, I'm telling you about what we're going to do. You have no clue if I'm going to keep my part of the deal. Everything is on me to be able to show that I'm true to what I'm telling you is going to happen. And I'm confident with who I am, but I expect, you know, that you're going to watch me closely, and we're going to work together, and we're going to see how we are in a year or two from now.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you, Dr. Keller. Thank you,
Yeah,
Ron.
thank you.
Wes. All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kim.
Take
All right.
care.
Okay, thank you.